Walk through any city square and you'll see them, monuments, statues, and memorials. They rise above us, frozen in stone or bronze, gazing out over parks and plazas. To most people, they're just part of the scenery, but these figures whisper stories. Every monument is a message. Sometimes it's loud and proud, a nation's hero, a founder, a victory. But look closer, there's always a shadow. The story told is rarely the whole truth. What is left unsaid matters just as much as what is celebrated. Power builds monuments, but trauma often lingers beneath. They tell us who to honor, who to mourn, and what moments to remember, but they also conceal. Underneath the marble there are stories of conquest, oppression, and resistance. We'll explore the hidden histories and bitter debates behind some of the world's most famous landmarks. Because monuments do not just preserve the past, they provoke the present. Monuments are not just art, they are statements of power. When leaders put up statues, they are sending a message about who's in charge, what values matter, and which stories deserve to last. The bigger the statue, the bigger the claim. In many ways, monuments are propaganda in 3 dimensions. But monuments also have a strange power over memory. They freeze a moment, a person, or an idea, and hold it up as something to be admired. They can turn complicated, messy histories into simple, heroic tales. This is not by accident. Those in power want to control the story. A monument is a way to say, this is what matters, this is who we are. Yet monuments are not just about celebration. They are often built on top of old wounds. They can be reminders of conquest, domination, or loss. For those on the losing side of history, a statue can feel like a slap in the face. A daily reminder that their suffering is forgotten, or worse, celebrated. So while monuments may look silent and still, they are anything but neutral. They are battlegrounds over memory and meaning, and sometimes those battles erupt into real conflict. Why do monuments become such lightning rods for anger and debate? It's because they are never just about the past. They shape how we see ourselves today. When a statue stands in a public space, it sends a message about who belongs, who has power, and whose pain is worth remembering. Monuments often mark the spoils of war, the triumph of one group over another, or the glory of an empire. But history does not stand still. The world changes. New voices demand to be heard. Old wounds reopen. Suddenly, what once seemed like a proud symbol becomes a source of shame or outrage. Nationalism plays a big role. Governments use monuments to build identity and unity. But that unity often comes at a cost, the erasure of uncomfortable truths. Colonialism, slavery, genocide, these are rarely carved into stone. Instead, we get sanitized stories and heroic poses. That's why monuments become flashpoints. They are not just relics, they are live wires. When people challenge a monument, they are really challenging the story a society tells about itself. And that can be very dangerous for those in power. Take the case of Cecil Rhodes. In Oxford, England, his statue looms over the entrance to Oriel College. To some, Rhodes is a symbol of scholarship and philanthropy. But for many, he is the face of brutal British imperialism in Africa. A man whose vision of empire left millions dispossessed and dead. In 2015, students at the University of Cape Town launched the Rhodes Must Fall movement. Their demand was simple: remove the statue of Rhodes from their campus. But the movement became much more than that. It sparked a global debate about who gets honored in our public spaces, and whose suffering is ignored. Supporters of the statue argued that history cannot be erased. They said Rhodes did good as well as bad. But activists pointed out that honoring a colonizer sends a clear message to black students: your pain does not matter. The debate spread to Oxford, where students and faculty demanded the statue's removal. The college resisted, fearing backlash from donors and alumni. The Rhodes statue still stands for now, but the controversy forced institutions to confront their colonial legacies. It showed how monuments are not just about the past, they shape who feels welcome and who feels invisible today. In Tokyo, the Yasukuni Shrine sits at the heart of a storm. It honors Japan's war dead, including convicted war criminals from World War II. For many Japanese, the shrine is a place of mourning and national pride. For China, Korea, and other countries invaded by Japan, it is an insult and a provocation. Every year, visits by Japanese politicians to Yasukuni spark protests across Asia. To Japan's neighbors, the shrine whitewashes the country's wartime atrocities. It turns aggressors into victims, and erases the suffering of millions. Activists and historians argue that the shrine is part of a broader pattern, refusing to fully reckon with the crimes of empire. Inside Japan, opinions are divided. Some see the shrine as simply a place to honor ancestors, Others admit the controversy but insist that the dead deserve respect, regardless of politics. The government walks a tightrope, caught between nationalist pride and international anger. For survivors and their descendants in Korea and China, the shrine is a constant reminder that their pain is not recognized. It's not just about a building. It's about whose story gets told and whose gets silenced. Travel to Israel and the Palestinian territories and you'll find a monument unlike any other, the West Bank Barrier. Israelis call it a security fence. Palestinians call it the apartheid wall. It stretches for hundreds of miles, snaking across land claimed by both peoples. For many Israelis, the barrier is a shield. They say it has stopped suicide bombings and saved countless lives. For Palestinians, it is a daily humiliation. A concrete scar that steals land, divides families, and chokes off communities. The wall is covered in graffiti, protest art, and messages of hope and anger. Internationally, the barrier is deeply controversial. Some see it as a necessary evil, others as a violation of human rights. The International Court of Justice has called it illegal. But for those who live in its shadow, the wall is not just politics. It is an ever-present reminder of conflict, loss, and powerlessness. The West Bank Barrier shows how monuments can be living, evolving battlegrounds. Every spray-painted slogan is a challenge to the story the wall is meant to tell. Across Eastern Europe and Central Asia, another kind of monument has faced a reckoning. For decades, Lenin, Stalin, and other Soviet leaders watched over city squares from their pedestals. Their statues were symbols of communist power, unity, and strength. But after the collapse of the USSR, the meaning of these monuments changed overnight. In country after country, crowds tore down the old statues. Sometimes it was joyous, sometimes it was violent. For many, toppling Lenin was a way to reclaim public space and reject decades of oppression. But not everyone agreed. Some saw the statues as part of their heritage, or even as art worth preserving. The removal of Soviet statues raised tough questions. Should countries erase all traces of a painful past? Or should they keep some monuments as reminders, warnings, or lessons? In places like Ukraine, new monuments went up, heroes of independence replacing the old communist icons. The fate of Soviet statues shows how quickly the meaning of a monument can shift. What was once untouchable can become hated overnight. And yet, the wounds they represent do not heal so easily. Controversial monuments aren't confined to former battle zones. In Belgium, statues of King Leopold II still stand, though many view him not as a hero but a butcher. Under his rule, the Congo Free State became a site of terror, with millions killed. Activists now demand his statues be removed and his crimes acknowledged. In Latin America, Christopher Columbus and Hernan Cortés face similar scrutiny. Once honored, they are now seen as symbols of genocide and colonization. Indigenous groups have toppled or defaced Columbus statues. In Spain, debates rage over monuments to conquistadors. Locals and historians clash over their fate. Some want them gone, others want plaques explaining the full story, while still others want new monuments to indigenous resistance. It's about whose version of history gets carved into the landscape. These monuments are battlegrounds for memory, forcing us to ask, can a society truly move forward if it refuses to face its darkest chapters? When official monuments fail to tell the whole truth, people take matters into their own hands. Protest art blossoms on the surfaces of old statues. Counter-monuments spring up, temporary, makeshift, but powerful. They tell stories that official plaques ignore. In Berlin, the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe is a stark field of concrete slabs, an intentional break from heroic statues. In the United States, artists have covered Confederate statues with graffiti, shrouds, and banners. In South Africa and Brazil, murals and memorials honor the victims of colonial violence and celebrate resistance. These acts are not just vandalism, they are a demand to be seen and heard. They are reminders that public space belongs to everyone, not just the powerful. Grassroots movements push for new forms of remembrance, ones that acknowledge pain, honor survival, and invite debate. As societies rethink their monuments, a deeper question emerges: who deserves to be remembered? Can we build memorials that heal, rather than divide? Or are we doomed to fight the same battles over and over in stone and bronze? Monuments are not just about history, they are about power, identity, and the future. Every decision to build, keep, or remove a statue is a choice about who we are and who we want to be. For too long, the same voices have dominated these choices. The same stories have been told. The same traumas have been hidden. But the world is changing. New generations are demanding a reckoning. They want monuments that tell the truth, not just the triumphs. They want memorials that remember the victims as well as the victors. They want space for grief, for healing, and for hope. We cannot erase the past, but we can choose how we remember it. We can build monuments that challenge rather than comfort. We can honor resilience as well as power. We can create spaces where everyone's story matters. So, here is the final question. If you could rebuild history in stone, whose story would you carve? And what truths would you dare to tell?